glad that you suggested this topic and suggested getting a bunch of different people's perspectives, particularly people that are doing regenerative growing and have been for a long time. And some of the food companies that want to work with them. And there are a range of different views about what is regenerative agriculture, but then also what regenerates you as a person. What is regenerative just generally beyond agriculture. So to start off, love to hear some of your thoughts about this whole topic.
Well, Sarah, the reason that I thought about this for our network and for this discussion for our community was because there's a lot of people claiming they're regenerative, and it's like, well, are they not? The question comes up, like, I'm doing all these regenerative practice and they only do that. How can they call themselves regenerative when I'm doing so much more? I think for me, one of the things is if somebody is taking steps. Now, you may have taken a lot of steps years ago and then just kept moving on. But if your neighbor's taking 2 or 3 steps forward and getting there, then be supportive instead of going, well, you're not doing enough. Everybody needs to do what they need to do. And, the way I regenerate a system is going to be different from somebody else's. And the number of steps that I can take right away is going to be different because I probably have a higher tolerance for the change that somebody else might not have the same tolerance for. But I think the whole thing is about rebuilding or restoring of a system, of something, but not restoring it and just back to its good old self. Mm-hmm. Because that's where this whole term of regenerative came from was, well, why are we sustaining a broken system? Mm-hmm. We need to regenerate the broken system. Well, do we need to, and if we regenerate it, do we regenerate it to the same spot? Or do we actually, disturb everything and reconfigure it and then have it growing even more? So I think the whole idea needs to be that when you regenerate something, you are evolving the system and not devolving it. Mm-hmm. So in other words, you're helping it come together, you're helping it adapt, you're making it more resilient and more resistant and all these things, and you're not taking it to pieces. You're not, destroying it in any way. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that we don't, I think we've got to a point with maybe people have like what we'll call a conventional agricultural system and they want to change. Well, it's about taking steps where you're actually nurturing the land instead of always destroying it. So if you think about it, I think Gabe Brown said this best one time. He said, every morning I would wake up, and Gail Fuller said this too. Every morning I would wake up and I would think about what am I going to kill today during the growing season. I mean, you want to stop that. That even just stopping thinking that is regenerative. Mm-hmm. Just pulling out the nitrogen IV and not being addicted to nitrogen anymore, and then thinking about, well, when do I really need nitrogen, and makes you more regenerative and let's think about that. You're more regenerative because now you're regenerating economy, mm-hmm. right? Because now I'm lowering my cost of production. I'm putting more money in my pocket. Maybe that means the family and I can go on a nice vacation or something, mm-hmm. Or I can get something else. I mean, that's regenerative too. Mm-hmm. Regenerating rural economy, like being able to put in a small scale packing house or a mobile solder facility so that somebody has a job, mm-hmm. somebody in your community or some family in your community has a job. That's regenerative as well. But I think regenerative is this whole system. It's not one thing. It's not taking a step. Mm-hmm. It's not prescriptive. And that's the one reason this term came up, I think, was because nobody wanted to be prescribed that this is the only way you can be sustainable. Mm-hmm. This is the only way you can be regenerative. The idea is that it's not prescriptive at all. It's very authentic. It's very grassroots. It's very like, I'm doing all these things to benefit the environment, to benefit my community, to benefit myself, to, benefit the climate. And I'm going forward. I'm regenerating a better system. And your system may look totally different from mine, but mine might be fully regenerated too.
Yeah.
And we don't want, we can think of it a bit like fire. Like fire in the ecosystem, and how like the Aboriginal people used to set fire to things when things got so that they didn't have any more food anymore because they were in a climax situation. So they set fire to it all so that everything would be green and lush and again. They were regenerating the system. And I think you can think about it that way too, that it's a disturbance. If a grassland is static and everything is old and they're all overgrown, then putting animals in there or lighting a match or something like that is going to regenerate the system and make it productive again.
How do you get around that human tendency to want to put a box around it though? Because that keeps coming up over and over. Even though people say they know it's a mindset and they know but they still are doing it. They still are doing it.
Well, yeah, they're still doing it because we can profit from it in some way, right? Like if I put a stamp on it, then that I've agreed that this is regenerative. But then that's my definition of regenerative. And in the end, it's about supporting agriculture, supporting farmers that are rebuilding the ecosystem. We want to put a box around it because then it says that I'm better than them.
Yeah.
Or that I can aspire to them because they're better than me. Well, instead, let's just make it transparent. If you're being regenerative, then what are you doing that's regenerative? Why don't you just tell me? What are you doing? Are you just stopping the use of pesticides? Well, okay, maybe you could go farther. But if I'm the consumer, I have a choice then. I'm like, well, this person here has stopped pesticides and stopped doing this and has shown that their water is clean and they have no more nitrates in it. Well, I'm going to buy from them because their produce is the same price as this other one and they're not doing nearly as much. Because it's the same with the organic certification. It's a certification. It says that you made this level. And when we were creating a national standard in Canada for organics, we had the same thing. It was like, but I'm certified in this agency and we do so much more. Why don't you want to set to our standards? And it was like, we have to set a baseline level that nobody goes below. But after that, if you want to be better than somebody else, that's up to you.
But do you think
the problem was, right, is when we set this level, then that was all.
Right.
It was like, and it's like, I can live up to your expectations or I can step down to your expectations.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to have slightly different expectations. So I think really in the end, it's about growing something and growing it not just for one thing. Like the same thing is in that box. What are you regenerating?
Well, it's almost like I would like to see as a way to help consumers understand it. It regenerative displayed as like a path, because it is this journey that never ends, as opposed to like a done list of practices that you've now completed, but like a path that, maybe that flowers out all over the place. And then people could like color in the parts that they've done, or so.
I like that idea.
Probably too new agey.
Yeah, no, but I like it because it's like, and that's the whole idea of transparency,
right?
Is where are you on this scale? Like what, do you have clean water? Have you checked? Do you have pesticides on your food? Where's your pesticide test? Things like that. It's not, and it doesn't need verification. Yeah. Okay. I mean, we know that, when you set up a farm stand and it's on the honor system, I know people who have hardly ever had a theft on the honor system. Like And that when they owned the store, they had more theft than they did in the honor system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that we're always guarding against the minority. And this is about majority of people. And yeah, you're going to have a different regenerate. And I think that's the point of this whole series is your regenerative is going to be different from my regenerative, which is going to be different from somebody else's regenerative. And that's the whole point, is to show that there's this really broad definition of what this is. But I think everybody will agree, we know what it is not.
Yeah.
We know that it is not about polluting the environment. We know that it is not about coating this food with pesticides. We know that it is growing things in a way that keeps our soil healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of what regenerative is. And regenerative is a system. I think the other thing is that when we do the box, everything is dissected.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm a scientist. Everything is reduction. Like, well, what are the parts that make the whole?
Yeah.
Well, let's just have the whole. And accept that the whole is, this is the whole. And then in the next 2 years, this will be the whole. And then the next few years, this will be the whole.
Yeah. It's, and thinking about this for me too. I mean, I had really hoped that we could connect farmers with brands and bring their stories forward. And that's a lot harder than it, I mean, knew it was going to be hard, but it's even harder than it sounded. But the thing that I come back to, and hearing you talk about this too, is that really the only way you're going to understand the regenerative nature story is if the brand they're working with knows the farmers that they're working with, because these, just accumulating a set of practices and like giving a lump amount of data, it's better than nothing. But in terms of really understanding the context of what happened and what's the change over their baseline, how are they improving on that same spot year after year over 10 years? You can't get any of that if you don't know where the supply is coming from. So it maybe is a pointer back to the importance of knowing the farmer, which I know everybody wants, all the consumers say they want, and the brands would love to provide it, but that would require a real change in the system that we have for sourcing ingredients.
Absolutely.
And maybe that's a way to think for the food system to think about regenerating itself, because there's a lot pushed on the farmers and there's a lot of responsibility there. They have, they're managing the basic resources. That's where all the impact is. But the food supply chain itself has a lot to answer for too. And maybe some of this thinking about journey and about change and disruption I'd like it if they'd think about it too.
I mean, we're thinking about it. Okay. So that brings up the next part is like, let's not think about this just in terms of agriculture.
Right.
Yes, the food system should regenerate itself as well. Absolutely, it should be. And I think there's a number of brands that are trying to do that, but trying to, work with farmers and know their farmers and know where they're getting it from and things like that. I think they are. I think more people are, I think if anything that's happened with COVID, it's more people are doing things for themselves. Like they're actually cooking. They're actually making things. They're trying to be, a little bit more like their ancestors and actually putting food by. And some people are learning that for the first time in their lives, like how to can something, I think that this whole idea of regenerative is about not just, it's about doing things that are right for the ecosystem too, right for your community. We often ask ourselves, why is it so hard to be right? Why is it so hard to do something good? Sometimes it seems way easier to do something that's not nearly as good.
Yeah.
And I think part of that's because we legislate for the minority. We always legislate against things instead of for things. And so let's think about regenerative as for agriculture, for the environment, for climate change, and that it's all about trying to regenerate a system where we don't have any of those problems. Now, we're going to have other problems. Absolutely, we are. But it's also about regenerating your health, regenerating the health of your animals.
Well, and that's the magic of regeneration, is that you realize how resilient a lot of these mediums are, whether it's the soil or ourselves, that if you put effort into it, these things can come back and they can thrive in a way that where they were depleted before.
Absolutely. I mean, perfect example of regeneration was on this farm in South Africa where they got rid of all the invasive tree species, pines and eucalyptus on the farm in a particular watershed area. And all of a sudden it was a river, not a creek anymore. Mm. All of a sudden the water cycle came again. Mm-hmm. That's regenerative. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was destroying something else. But then wait a minute, they had mobile pyrolysis. So they were making charcoal for the community out of the trees that they took out. Another regenerative thing. So you want to ching them up. You want to line them up. They're not just one thing. Mm-hmm. They're this system that is self-perpetuating, that thrives, that nourishes, that, and that is nourishing and nurturing.
And I've heard you talk too about when you make some of these changes and then there's an exponential return sometimes, like you may make a change here or there, and then it interacts with other things going on. And so the result is much bigger than the one small change you made that time.
Yeah. And I'll go back to that same example in South Africa. I mean, it went from a trickle of water to a raging river and a waterfall. And all the local communities got charcoal for a very long time for their fires and to cook with. So you have to ask yourself, what was the downside of taking out all those trees?
Yeah.
And people could say, well, they were fixing all this carbon, but they were also not allowing for the water to move in the way it should have in the first place. So this is where we have to find a balance, and it's always about a balance. And maybe we could even call it rebalancing, because maybe that's some of what we're doing is we're rebalancing everything.
Yeah.
Or we're finding a new balance.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that is fascinating to me, and I'd love you to share what you think about this, is, hearing people like you talk about how plants actually talk to each other through the roots and through the chemicals there's this harmony, there's this harmonious world going on below the ground that we could learn a lot from in terms of, restoring one to the other, because one gives something, the other needs it, and one needs something and it calls for the nutrients that it needs. And I mean, it's crazy for when if you don't know about it, what's going on down there is just amazing.
It is. I mean, I was talking with somebody about that today and saying, plants are really intelligent. I mean, everybody thinks that they're just sitting there passively kind of growing. They're not. They are defending and they're on offense, and they, like corn and actually a number of plants, if an insect larva is nibbling on the roots, or an insect, are calling for insect parasitizing nematodes to come and get it. And they're sending out, volatile and chemical signals to deal with that, as well as armoring up and whatnot. And, they're trying to create a supportive environment, and they're sharing that information with the entire plant community around them. So when one plant gets nibbled on, it sends off signals that all the other plants are like, oh, so-and-so's got, nibble, armor up. We need to take action. And they'll start sending out signals out through their roots too, because it's like, that is the signal for a root feeder. Send out the anti-root feeder signal. This is a system too, and it's self-perpetuating as well. The system didn't need us. We need them.
Well, what's really striking to me is knowing farmers. Is you worked with them for so many years, and I've had the joy to get to work with a lot of them. They're such independent people, which I admire. But that can also be isolating, and it could we can learn from the plants. I mean, they send out these signals and they respond together as a community, and maybe that's part of regeneration and rebalancing too.
It is. It's about rebuilding our communities. rural development. I mean, think of how decimated our rural communities have become.
Mm-hmm.
Now, part of that is like, is people thinking that they need more land in order to have more yield without thinking about the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
What is my cost of production? What is my net productivity? Maybe my net productivity is better on what I can manage than taking over the world. Do I really need to do that? Can I work cooperatively with my neighbors? It used to be that people would say you need a community. And now it's like, I don't need my community. I can just like live at home and be fine. Humans that's not who we are. Maybe it's what we're getting to be. I don't know. But people are gregarious, and we are better working in teams and together than we are succeeding by ourselves. And that's why farmers love it. I mean, I think about the farm community. Everybody loves going to these meetings and having, and networking and doing all these things, as long as I'm sharing my yields with my neighbor. But I'm going to go back a step further, like take it back. I noticed when my son was at school, that when he was in the Montessori school, and it was more about respect, like respect for your peers, respect for your teachers. Adults were expected to respect their children. And so, for example, if your child was busy doing something, it was expected that you would say, hey, excuse me, we got to do this like the same way you would with another adult. And I noticed that the kids in that class would talk to each other and go, wow, look what you did. That is really cool. Could you make me one of those? Then you get into the school system, the public school system, or even like a non-Montessori program. And the next thing you know is like, I hate you. Look at what you can do.
Yeah.
It's not about, you do that really well. Can I bring you into my circle?
Mm-hmm.
And you can help me too, because you do that really well and I do this really well. And maybe if I respect what you do really well and then you respect what I do really well, then maybe we can bring somebody else in. And in the true sense of what this is, cascading effects would be metabiosis, where if I create an environment where I welcome people in and then somebody else comes in, then that changes the environment again. And then more people want to come in. Oh, and then more people want to come in. And then somebody else wants to come in. And the next thing I know, well, I need these services now because I built this little community. Maybe somebody knows a plumber that can come in and move into our community, or an electrician or somebody like that. And I think about the community of Peojo in Argentina, where a group of parents that were also farmers decided that they weren't going to have all their kids in Buenos Aires, because that's what all the farmers in the area did. If your kids, as soon as your kids go to school, you move to Buenos Aires and they all go to school in Buenos Aires. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. We don't want to have the families living 4 hours away and our husbands having to live out on some little shack on our property during the week and coming home every 2 weeks or something like that. We want to be home and be part of life. So they bought a building. The farmers all got together and they bought a building that they called the school. So they bought the school. And then they had some teachers, but they didn't have enough teachers. So they went into their community and they said, well, the pharmacist could teach chemistry. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. The banker can probably teach accounting. Mm-hmm. And before you know it, they had a school and they had all these people teaching. The vet was teaching biology and the doctor was teaching biology and one of the local nurses was teaching biology. And, and before they know it, they had this school where their children didn't have to go away. Mm-hmm. And before they knew it, everybody wanted to go to that school.
Yeah, I'd love to send my daughter to that school. You have a real applied connection to the subject.
Yeah,
because the
and
people
then
that are teaching it are doing it,
and then eventually they got teachers, but
Mhm.
at first they didn't have the money for teachers.
Mhm. Yeah.
And they didn't have they didn't have those people in their community. I
Mhm.
mean, they weren't, the teachers who taught chemistry were not in their community. So it was really like, okay. And so the kids just had to pass the exams,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
They had to pass the national exam. Didn't matter how they got there. And they did. And I think that's a great example of regenerative. They built a school, they had a vision, they achieved the vision, and the whole community moved up. Before, they didn't have a doctor in their community. After they got the school and the school got going and the community started to thrive, well, then doctors moved in from, because they were like, well, I don't want to live in Buenos Aires. I can live in this really nice rural community.
Well, that's a theme again, that you can't do it all on your own, and it requires effort, but it requires an effort of like a symphonic effort, like an effort that works with other people for this larger goal.
You need synergy.
Yeah.
You need a group of people who have a vision and synergy. And you can implement so many things on your own, but then you need other people to support you. To say, yeah, keep going. Give you a pat on the back every now and again, or verification that you are doing the right way. It's just like everybody says, well, misery likes company. Well, success also likes company.
Yeah. Especially,
like company. We want to know that we're supported. And if I say, oh, okay, I want to do this, and somebody goes, well, that's the dumbest idea ever. Well, the chances of me doing it are not that good. Either that, or I'm just contrary enough to go, well, guess what? I don't care what you think. I'm going to do it anyways. We want people to go, give it a go then. You want to have a try at this? Well, then why don't you take a bit of this and just have a go?
Yeah, it's one of the really great differences between the network that you've built, the online community that you have, and just public, like free, like Twitter or Facebook, which can be fine for certain things. But I mean, I've heard from a number of the farmers that one of the things they didn't like about that forum, like Twitter in particular, is that they put up a picture of something cool they've done, and there would be people that were, positive, but there's always a tendency to try to knock it down too. Oh, well, that's
but
not that
I
great.
did this,
Exactly.
and I'm so much better than
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And that energy really detracts from that person and what they're trying to do. And it, maybe discourages somebody else who would have tried it, or would have, made a positive comment. And so we just don't have any of that in our community, because the only people that join are wanting to be on the continuous improvement journey. So there's something
but also
to be
that's
said
not something that I would support.
right.
You and I would support.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, I don't support people who, I look at it this way, and that I look at systems that work, and I ask the question, why does this work? I don't ask the question, why does this one over here not work?
Yeah.
This person has a system that really works. How does that work? I don't need to dissect one that doesn't work, because I know it doesn't work. So why do I care it doesn't work? Now, I might care that if it's my system and it doesn't work, I might come over here. It's just like you have something that works. Like you have a car that works, it's the same car, and you start dissecting it going, oh, so that's what my problem is. But again, you're looking at it from a positive standpoint. You're not looking at it to take it to pieces so that you can knock it down.
Yeah.
You're always thinking about how can you build? How can you be supportive? How can you create a world that thrives and survives and is resilient and is healthy, educated and healthy?
Yeah.
Where we don't have cancers all the time, and we don't have people struggling. We don't have wars, people blowing each other up.
Yeah.
Where we're supportive of each other. And saying, wow, you do this really well. How can we work with you so you can do this really, really well? And I can support you with what I do really, really well. Instead of being jealous because you have this and I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an attitude of abundance, and that abundance brings more abundance, as opposed to it's a small pie and I have to get the majority of it.
Yeah, I have to take majority of it, so the rest of you go downhill.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's about, well, how about I help you up?
Mm-hmm.
And are there going to be people who are detractors? Absolutely, there are. There always are.
Mm-hmm.
But are they majority or are they the minority?
Mm.
Probably they are the minority. So why are we so focused on the minority instead of the majority?
Mm-hmm.
If the
Yeah.
majority of people want this really growing, nurturing, nourishing food supply chain that is good for the environment and whatnot, then why are we focused on the people who are not doing a good job of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We need to be focused on the people that are doing a great job of it. And we need to be propping them up, and we need to be helping the people who want help.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. And that's the one thing I would say that is true about everybody I know, is that they have field days on their farm because they want people,
Mm-hmm.
right? They want people to see what they're doing, and they want to share.
Mm-hmm.
They want to share what they're doing. Most of the farmers I know that are doing a great job of growing, that are really innovative, that are doing really well, will tell you anything you want to know. You just have to ask. And they'll share.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I think. I mean, that's the community we all need, is the one that somebody says, oh, would you like to do that? How can I help you? Well, this is what I do.
So what I'm doing with these interviews too at the end is to see if you can sum up what you've talked about in like one or two sentences, which is terribly hard because it's such a big concept. But so I'm going to ask you to fill in the sentence regenerative agriculture is in a couple of sentences. Regenerative agriculture is.
Regenerative agriculture is about rehabilitation, restoring. And I mean, when I say restoring, I mean restoring system function. It's about aggregating, not splitting.
Mm.
It's about bringing people together. It's about bringing things together. It's about creating communities, thriving, vibrant communities. It's about diversity.
Mm-hmm.
So regenerative, it is diverse, has a lot of diversity in it. It has functioning communities and has function, like it's functioning. And it's like cooking with gas.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Regenerative, you put the gas to it and it is bubbling in a really productive way. It's like a magnet. Everything is coming to it.
Mm.
And it's building from that magnetic force, and things are getting stuck to it. All sorts of different things are being stuck to it.
Mm.
But it's growing and growing and growing in a really positive and productive way.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. Anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
I hope with this little segment about what Sarah and I have been talking about, and what we're asking all of you to talk about, that you will also take a picture of what you think is regenerative. Maybe it's a meal with all your family. Maybe it's your new grandchild or your new child. Maybe it's a puppy. Maybe it's your little black beauty calf that just got born today.
Mm.
But take a picture for us about things that, and any picture can be a whole collage of pictures that you think represent regenerative for you. And with our understanding that there is no one definition of regenerative that works for everybody.
That's great.
So please submit your photos.
Yes. Submit your photos. All right. Well, thanks, Jill.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for taking the time for this. Appreciate it, as always.
Thanks,